Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are entering day 109. Wow, you hear that, General Milley? Day 109. And I know you had received some information from your advisors that stipulated that the conflict would last no more than 76 hours. So, General Milley, if you're looking for an advisor to come on board and help you out, I would be more than happy to jump ship and give you counsel on what you are seeing. Obviously, I would need probably a senior executive level 2 compensation and maybe a retention bonus as well. But I would consider it for that level. Anyway, keep it in mind, General Milley. Anyway, again, day 109. That is, again, no one really thought that we would be looking at this conflict lasting that length of time. And we're also receiving intel that indicates that the Russians are preparing to continue operations to exceed 120 days from today. So they are building the capacity to continue war over 3 to 4 more months, at least at this point, and quite possibly even further. But right now, the baseline capability for the Russians to continue operations appear to be no less than 120 days as we talk right now. But right now, obviously the fighting continues. The heaviest fighting is taking place within the confines of several Donetsk, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Bakhmut. This area here, this war triangle that extends from Sloviansk east to several Donetsk down to Bakhmut and then back up, is kind of the area of some of the most intense fighting that is taking place. And what we'll do real quick is we'll start and we'll look to the north of Sloviansk and kind of give you an idea of what exactly the Russians are trying to do. It is very, very apparent right now. The Russians are consolidating its territorial gains along the Donetsk River for preparatory actions that would obviously involve then crossing the Donetsk River. But right now they appear, meaning the Russians, are wanting to secure all land areas that border the Donetsk River and have crossed the Donetsk River in some locales. They have attempted to make some forced crossings in other areas of the conflict zone. And unfortunately for Russian forces, that has been challenged by the Ukrainian forces as well. And some of those crossing operations have resulted in somewhat of a disaster for Russian forces. But at the same time, the Russians have effectively crossed the Donetsk River and continue to advance, specifically in a direction south of Izum towards Sloviansk, and then also in a multi-pronged operation both to the northeast of Popasna and west of Popasna as well, looking to eventually meet up with forces that are south of Lyman, thus completely encircling Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and other areas. And again, there are multiple Ukrainian brigades within this area of operation that are in jeopardy of being encircled. But if we look right now towards Sloviansk and we look at kind of the progress of it, so I'm going to kind of back up on this map a few days where you can kind of see what the Russians are trying to do. And we went back to about June 4th. So fast forward to here and you can clearly see the dynamic of the Russian campaign and what is exactly happening and why the Russians are doing what they're doing. So remember how I just talked about the goal in terms of seizing territory right up to the Donetsk River, and then we'll probably see that crossing, but I'll kind of fast forward from June 4th, and you can kind of see, again, that is what right now the Russians are doing in that locale. And very clearly, it's a very slow, methodical push towards Sloviansk. And right now, as we have talked about on repeated occasions, this is a artillery war that the Russians are executing right now. This is not a textbook in maneuver warfare, but a lesson in the use of massed fires, in the effective use of massed fires, and that's what the Russians are doing right now. Range is the Russians' friend, especially in terms of having to deal with some of the Ukrainian anti-tank guided weapons teams, which in the early stages of the war, and they continue to harry Russian forces as we speak. But in the early stages, where we're seeing massed Russian maneuver operations, those Ukrainian anti-tank weapons teams really caused great harm to several Russian units in its ongoing endeavors. And obviously, the range of these anti-tank guided weapon systems, usually in the terrain that we're seeing within the confines of the Ukrainian theater of operations, is anywhere from hundreds of meters to upwards to 2,000 to 3,000 meters. So the Russians are using its reconnaissance elements, its drone capability to identify, spot Ukrainian forces, and then unleash hell in terms of massive amounts of heavy artillery, and that is their modus operandi right now, their MO. So let's go over here to Lysychansk, and we're also going to kind of see Popasna, and we're going to kind of back up, and we're going to just kind of fast forward. We're going to go back all the way to June 1st, and we're going to fast forward now, where you can kind of see the Russian operation kind of unfold over the last several days and what it's exactly trying to do. So probably more of success for Russian forces in the northwest, as opposed to the kind of the southeast quadrant of this conflict zone. We did see initially the Russians achieve a fairly good success around Popasna. We have seen those Russian naval infantry units in conjunction with the Russian separatist forces and regular Russian ground forces achieve fairly successful operations near Popasna, and then gradually kind of back off a bit in terms of large-scale maneuver operations, and going back to that the heavy use of a lot of artillery systems. And right now, the Russians in the area near Popasna are directing its activity, one, towards Bakhmut. The other operation is to sever what would be the Bakhmut to Severodonetsk, or the Lysychansk main highway. And this would be ultimately the last main arterial route that could be used by Ukrainian forces to supply Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. And right now, even currently, that is becoming very difficult, because given the proximity of Russian forces to that main artery that runs from Bakhmut to Lysychansk, can be constantly harried by Russian artillery and tactical air assets. So again, very, very difficult for Ukrainian forces to be supplied, especially in the area immediately within the vicinity of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. But more importantly, we had talked about previously of this buildup of Russian forces south and west of Izum, this town located here. And right now, we can anticipate at some point, after the Russians continue to degrade and destroy Ukrainian forces with the use of superior artillery firepower, we can expect quite possibly an eventual assault straight down the M3 highway in conjunction with bridging operations over the Donetsk River. The Russians continue to conduct preparatory operations for said crossing at a variety of crossing points along the Donetsk River, so we can anticipate most likely in the not too distant future, we will see some fairly large scale Russian maneuver operations specifically designed to cross the Donetsk River in additional locales other than south of Izum and within the locale of Popasna. But at the same time, we are continuing to see Russian forces advance on the west bank of the Donetsk River towards Lysychansk, kind of from the south. So Lysychansk right now is under great jeopardy of being encircled. If you kind of look at the map and what's happening, obviously several Donetsk is under serious pressure right now, and eventually those forces are going to fail. It's just something that is going to happen for those forces in several Donetsk, those Ukrainian forces. And that's going to put the Russians right there on the Donetsk River on the eastern bank of the area near Lysychansk. At the same time, they are proceeding up the west bank of the Donetsk River, kind of in this northwesterly trajectory towards Lysychansk, and then obviously we could see further crossing points to the west of Lysychansk as well. Then you kind of have that outer layer of encirclement that's going on near Popasna, where you have Russian forces that could also then, in theory, eventually sever the main highway here and then continue to press up and attack Lysychansk from the rear as well. So not a good position to be in if you are the local Ukrainian commander of operations responsible for several Donetsk, Bakhmut, and other areas. Even the operations that are ongoing near Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, while probably much better defended and sitting in a much better position, the issue of supply and resupply of Ukrainian forces in this area is becoming much more difficult for Ukrainian forces, as I've talked about in previous videos. Furthermore, we have seen some long-range Russian cruise missile attacks. Cruise missiles fired off from Black Sea assets have targeted Ukrainian forces, and specifically a Western arms depot that the Ukrainians were using, and this is this city here, Chortkiv. This area has been attacked. Estimated at least 4 cruise missiles were used on a verified Ukrainian military depot that was being used as a reception and possible training area for anti-tank guided weapon systems being provided by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the United States, Poland, Romania, what have you. But we believe that a base was hit, and we can confirm that it was hit. Multiple cruise missile strikes, and the base, as reported by Ukrainian officials, was quote-unquote partially destroyed. And we anticipate that Russia will continue some of these long-range strikes against targets, especially Western targets that continue to flow into the country in support of the Ukrainian armed forces. We have received more reports that additional foreign volunteer forces, specifically a former British soldier who is operating on behalf of the Ukrainian army, was KIA'd recently. That is to include the 2 Brits, 1 Moroccan that was captured in Mariupol, and additional foreign forces we know have been KIA'd as well, and continued Russian strikes and fighting that is occurring. A lot of that information in terms of the amount, just as the Ukrainians are fairly hesitant about reporting its level of casualties, as are the Russians themselves as well. The sort of information being released about some of these foreign fighters fighting for the Ukrainian military is not making it out, and probably the numbers that are actually occurring in terms of casualties being taken. Believe me, it is a brutal war that is taking place right now. And as anecdotal reports indicate, again, a lot of these Western volunteers who have served in Iraq, Afghanistan, possibly other places around the world, have never really experienced the type of intense fighting that is now going on between Russia and Ukraine. So it's really kind of an eye-opening event for a lot of these foreign fighters, and most of these, well, all of these foreign fighters, especially those who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, have always benefited from air supremacy, complete air supremacy, not just air dominance, but complete air supremacy, and the ability to conduct calls for fire at almost their whim, and always to be supported by either tactical air assets, helicopter gunships, or drones. That is simply not the case in the ongoing war that is taking place in Ukraine. It's actually the shoe is on the other foot now, whereas the Russian side has the greater propensity to call in direct air support or long-range cruise missile strikes or heavy artillery upon these opposing forces, and in the case that many of these foreign nationals are now fighting on behalf of Ukrainian forces. So quite a wake-up for a lot of these troops that have decided to come and help and assist the Ukrainian military in its ongoing efforts against Russian forces. But again, most of the heaviest fighting taking place in the east. Again, I'll kind of go to a much higher level of view. You can kind of see I'll go back to June 1st again, and you can kind of see where things have and what things are kind of progressing and how things are looking. So again, broad frontal operations you can clearly see by Russian forces, very methodical drives west in terms of what they are trying to do, the Russian forces. We continue to see the Ukrainians push back with some limited success within the area near Kherson, specifically kind of northeast of Kherson. We have seen some limited success by Ukrainian forces. Again, a lot of the Russian combat capacity right now is continues to be directed more in a easterly direction towards this area here, as opposed to areas near Zaporizhia and west of Zaporizhia. And at the same time, the Ukrainians have the ability to have resources that are much more closer, because one, it's on the west bank of the Dnieper River, much more closer to bases of Ukrainian power such as Odessa, and then obviously you have that really major issue of the Ukrainians not having to cross the Dnieper River and then risk interdiction efforts by Russian forces as it attempts to move forces closer to areas such as Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and even Kharkiv as well. That is an issue for Ukrainian forces. But for Ukrainian forces, it's much easier for Ukrainian forces to come out of areas such as Kryvyi Rih and Mykolaiv and Odessa to reinforce and then conduct limited offensive operations against Russian forces. And that's kind of why we're seeing that. And the Ukrainians, in all probability, the battlefield commander for Ukrainian forces is looking to hopefully draw Russian forces from areas in the east towards Kherson to continue to require Russian forces, a massive amount of Russian forces, to continue its hold on the west bank of the Dnieper River. And this is the Dnieper River, and this is obviously the area, the footprint that Russia holds. Now, if Russia were to lose this and forced to withdraw and or retreat east of the Dnieper River, a couple things would would really cause the Russians some challenges going forward. One, if they decided to force its way over the Dnieper River again, that would be difficult. And there is a possibility that at some point there could have been some sort of Ukrainian element that had defected over to the Russian cause that maybe had assisted Russian forces in the crossing of the Dnieper River and the quick seizing of the city of Kherson. Now, obviously, we'll know more in the future about that, and then also the water rights as well, and that's the ability of the Crimea to obtain water flowing from the Dnieper River south into the Black Sea. And this was one major issue why the Russians were very concerned about establishing this land corridor and seizing control a lot of this area north of Crimea was the Crimean Canal that extended from the Dnieper River down to the Crimean Peninsula, which allowed the farming of the Crimean Peninsula. And without that water, which was eventually blockaded by Ukrainian forces, it became more difficult for the Crimea to grow food and produce and what have you and obviously just water for the Crimean Peninsula. But that's kind of where we sit right now. We're going to continue to watch things very, very closely, and obviously as things happen, we will, of course, report. I did want to note that almost did another a late video yesterday because we're hearing that the Russians could be preparing for multiple bridging operations over the Donetsk River at a number of locales. Now, we had also heard that the Russians had also crossed at some points as well, had established bridgeheads over the Donetsk River, or additional bridgeheads. So trying to confirm that. Obviously the fighting continues, and it's very, very intense fighting all along the front at this point. But we will continue to monitor, report, and bring you content for your consumption. Again, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.